Hello. Welcome to Middlesex County College. My name is Mark McCormick. I'm the Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs here at the college, and I want to welcome you to this Developmental Ed Summit put on by the New Jersey Council of County Colleges Center for Student Success. And if you haven't noticed our beautiful new building, this is one of two we got put up based on funding from the county and the state. This is our new Enrollment Services building. When you're finished here at the conference, take a walk around the door and go upstairs and see all the wonderful services we offer to students here in a one-stop model. We're also going to open in a month a new science lab building down the road here, 7 new labs for bio and 7 new labs for chemistry. So we're very proud and happy to have those new buildings for our students, and we're happy to have you here today to work on an important issue that we're all wrestling with, how to get our students at the lowest level of college readiness up through and past college readiness into continuing a degree and hopefully passing and graduating. I want to introduce the Executive Director of the Center for Student Success, my former colleague, Christine Harrington.
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, thank you, Mark. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for coming today. It is really just a thrill to see so many faculty and administrators and staff here that are so dedicated to our students that you're willing to spend your Friday afternoon with us. So first of all, just thank all of you really for being here today. I am really excited about being in this new role. It has, as I was walking around and circulating, I shared with many of you that this is a humongous job, and I can't do it alone. I mean, my goal is really to help and support all of you that are really working on the ground level to support student success. So we need to kind of work together and collaboratively to really make the magic happen. And this is an event like this is how some of that transfers into success for our students. So thank you so much for coming today. I do want to take a couple of moments to give a couple of thank yous and to introduce a couple of folks on my staff and on my advisory board. So first of all, I want to extend my thanks and gratitude to Middlesex County College for letting us use this wonderful facility and for giving us their media services folks so that we are able to videotape this for your colleagues at home who weren't able to be here today. So you can please let them know that you're getting the live version, which is going to be much better than the video version, but they'll get to at least share the story after. It's kind of like if you don't go to the party, it's not quite as fun watching the video of the party, but at least you get to participate in some level. Well, today you're going to be in for a real treat. We're going to have a great afternoon, I think, and really looking forward to that. Let me start by just telling you about my team. So as the executive director, I cannot do this alone, and instead of having a full-time assistant director, I have identified several key players that are going to be part-time assistants in different capacities. I have Donna Rogalski, who you probably all heard from via email or getting you registered for this event. Donna's in the back. Let's all give her a round of applause. She's tremendous. So you'll be hearing from her again, but she is a part-time only, so if you do email her, she may not be back to you within minutes, but she's very responsive, so just be patient. And then we have 2 other faculty members who are on the team. One who couldn't be here this afternoon, Teresa Capra. She's from Mercer County College. She's an education faculty member, and she'll be helping me coordinate professional development events, especially focused on teaching and learning processes, so as well as student services as well. So well, that's a great addition to our team. And then also here with me is Dr. Amy Vondrak. Where are you, Amy? There she's over at her Mercer table. And Amy has been phenomenal at helping with the college readiness now and college credit now work, and also with guided pathways. So she's like, just a godsend to have on my team. So I just want to give her another round of applause too. Please thank her for her time. And she'll be helping this afternoon after Ray is finished talking, giving his initial talk. We're going to be engaged in some group work in case you didn't peek in your folder and discover that yet. Yeah, we're going to get you active, and she'll be helping facilitate that. We also were very honored to have the presence of several of our advisory board members here. We had an advisory board meeting this morning, and we are just thrilled that Secretary Hendricks was able to join us, and she's in the back. If we can all give just kind of a shout out to Secretary Hendricks, thank you. And we also have Bob Grimmie, who is here on behalf of Aaron Fickner. Bob, are you in the back? There you are. Thanks so much for coming, Bob. And Sharon Goldstein is still here. Sharon is in the back as well. Thank you. And I also, is Phoebe Leke here still? I know she was here before, wasn't sure if she had to leave. And let's see, Jennifer Martin. She's in the back. Hello, thanks for coming, Jennifer. James Lavender, is he still here? Okay, I know some people had to leave. Paula Pando is in the back. Thank you for being here, Paula. Thank you. And Danielle Latard-Watkins. Is Danielle still able to be here? Did I miss someone else that's still here from this morning? Okay, well, thank you. I'm incredibly grateful to all of the members of my advisory board because, again, this is not a one-person job. I need the support of so many different folks, and my head is just, I got such a wonderful gift from them of their expertise, knowledge, and support this morning to guide the work of the center that I am just honored and thrilled to be a part of such an amazing opportunity. Okay, so at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to our keynote speaker. So Dr. Ray Garcia, he is an expert really in this world. He's worked in Larry's capacity. All of you know that Larry Nespoli, the president of NJCC. Well, for 20 years, Ray was the president of the Texas Association of Community Colleges. And he is also now chairing the Policy Leadership Trust Committee at JFF, Jobs for the Future. And honestly, Ray is just a warm, wonderful, kind man. I met Ray in July on my very first policy meeting, and I ended up sitting next to him at one of the meals, and he is just so giving of his time and expertise. He's just a warm, wonderful man with so much knowledge that he's going to share with us this afternoon. So if we could all please give Ray a very warm welcome, that would be fabulous. Thanks so much, Ray. We're looking forward to this great event.
Thank you, Christine, and thank all of you for being here, and thank you for welcoming me so kindly, and for being the first person to say I was kind and warm. If only my mother and wife could have heard. Yeah. You did forget to mention I was president of my high school slide rule club. I've spent a lot of time working on these issues. I know having someone from Texas in New Jersey might be a bit anathema. Let me start by saying I went to Mary Help of Christian School with a number of nuns from Jersey. And so I wanted to see who you were and why I am who I am. And in talking today, Christine said, I need a title for your speech. And so we came up with this, evolution and revolution. I know when you hear evolution in Texas, you assume the man's walking the other direction. But we really are talking about something that's moving forward. What I'm going to share with you today is in part the Texas experience and in part the national experience. Texas has gone through this for a long time, and you'll hear more about it. And it's not so much that I want to teach you everything and make you honorary Texans, which I'm glad to do, but it's because we've made mistakes, and it's more about the lessons learned than the details about the specific programs. And so as we go through this, what I'll try to do is pick out the nuggets, and hopefully you can pick them out as well. And I'm going to keep moving because I know when I talk to faculty, they tend to throw things. And so I'm going to keep going around the room to make myself a hard target for you to reach. So let's get started. Where does developmental ed come from? Well, for most of us, in Texas, the Dev Ed story really began in 1986. And before that, this was the prevailing view of the world. Students are free to fail. I don't know about your college experience, but I know I had the class. It was constitutional law with a professor who actually looked a lot like this guy. His name was Wallace Mendelson. And he actually did the look to your left, look to your right. Some of you won't be here at the end of the semester. I was on the left. Then there's this view. Let the students fly. Some will fly, some will crash. Some will crash gracefully, some less so. And this actually was a really hard nut to crack. What ultimately cracked it in Texas was something called the Hardesty Commission. Really, the last couple of sentences are the most important, is after studying what was happening in Texas without DevEd, said, we don't know who these students are or where they are, but we know they represent a generation of failure in our educational system. You know, those are powerful words. And what that meant is we couldn't afford to look to the left and look to the right, that we had to take care of those students and ensure that those students found a way to be successful. And that became the cause of the Hardesty Commission, was how do we make these students successful? And so what they did is they had a number of recommendations. Test all entering students. Give them strong advising programs. Offer non-credit opportunities for them to become ready. Make remediation a requirement. That was huge. Before, and for a lot of students, and where some states have gone now, is to make it optional. And I don't know how many of you have heard Kay McClenny speak in the past, but you know students don't do optional. And so having a recommendation that said it's required was big, and the other piece of that was you had to retest before the student accumulated 60 hours of credit, evaluation of the faculty, and legislative funding. Great recommendations. If we had done this, Texas would be kicking your rear. But you know what the story is. It didn't happen. We developed a test. It was highly prescriptive. The focus was on process and not on the student. What it turned into was state auditors looking at institutions and saying, did you test all of your students? Did you put them all in remediation? Did you retest them? If they found students who didn't get tested or who didn't get retested or who weren't placed in remediation in samples, they did extrapolations. And so it was costing institutions. The auditor would deduct the extrapolated amount of money from every institution's budget. And so where do you think the administrator focus was? Where do you think the board focus was? Is we're not going to make any mistakes. We're not going to get any exception audits. And so we were throwing more and more people into DevEd just to make sure that the auditor didn't ever question whether they were supposed to be in there or not. We never developed good non-credit offerings. There was some funding for them initially, and then the money went away. And so that option disappeared. There was never a dime for advising. And the cost estimates of what DevEd was going to cost were so ridiculously low that the legislature freaked out when they actually saw the number of students who were going in, and those students were going in there not because they necessarily had to be in there, but because the institutions were afraid of the state auditor. They were afraid of being caught up in the bureaucratic process, and so we completely lost the focus on the student. And this went on for nearly a decade. The people who ran the program were well-meaning, but we didn't talk about students. We talked about regulation, and we talked about audits. And that really wasn't what the Hardesty Commission had recommended. We missed the boat entirely, and we really lost a complete decade focusing on that. In the meantime, what we were doing was throwing people in DevEd courses. They were becoming discouraged, so the failure rates were exactly what you might expect. And so we just created this culture of compliance, is just do what you're told, don't think about what's supposed to be right. This is a really critical piece when we talk about how we're supposed to do DevEd reform, because the faculty was grown up in this culture. This is the way we're supposed to do it. And, oh, sorry. She still scares me. And I can, since a lot of you are math folks, I can tell you her name was Sister Lupe. And her math teaching in 4th grade was to grab the math book and make you go up to the board, answer your homework problem on the board. If you got it wrong, she'd hit you on the head with a book. I don't know that concussions help learning, but it certainly was an incentive to try to cheat off the guy who didn't know what he was doing. And so after this culture, finally some people said, this isn't working. And so it wasn't until 1997, this is almost a decade after the Hardesty Commission report, that we said, this test that we've developed may not be the best test. There might be other options. And so we broke the ice a little bit by letting folks try Compass or Accuplacer at the time. I know some of these aren't options anymore. And the legislation also eliminated the retest requirement, which was huge. Because think about it. You've taken DevEd, or you've taken a test, you've been put in DevEd, maybe you finished DevEd, and a very precious few students did that. You've taken 30 hours or 45 hours, and before we let you transfer to a university, and you couldn't transfer until you've gotten the retest, that was just insane. But that was the culture, and getting rid of that was huge. And then something else happened in the state. Like a lot of states, we were deeply concerned about the college-going rate of students in Texas. Not enough people were going to school. Not enough people were earning college degrees. And so we created a plan that was called Closing the Gaps. There's a new generation of that plan called 80 by 20. Different states have different versions of this. Tennessee has their Drive to 55. I would have gone 65. And usually when I'm driving, it's 80. But we did that. And so we said, we need more people to come. But the people coming to college, when you improve access and when you encourage more people to come, aren't the people who are the storybook college student. It's not the myth. It's not what we call Bobby and Betty Baylor. It's not those students. It's the students who have challenge. It's the people who are first generation, who don't know how to navigate college. It's the people who might be underprepared, who are thinking they might try college. And so we've got this explosion of new students, and lo and behold, the majority of these students need DevEd because they are underprepared, because they come from populations that either don't have access to good public education or who, for one reason or another, didn't do well in their public education experience. And so what happened to our DevEd numbers during that period of time? Through the roof. Same story in most every other state that did the same kind of thing. And now the legislature is saying, oh my God, look at all the money we're spending on DevEd. This is insane. Somebody's not doing their job. There was finger pointing at K-12. There was legislation filed that said that the community colleges could bill the public schools for any students that came. Of course, that never passed, but that was one thing. There was another story that was being told by public school superintendents, is community colleges are intentionally putting students in DevEd because it's a moneymaker for them. Any of you making a lot of money on DevEd? Well, neither were we. It just wasn't happening, but that was the environment. And so it got nasty, it got ugly. And so the legislature said, let's find ways to reduce the number of people in DevEd. But it actually created an opportunity for a good conversation. It wasn't as good as we wanted it to be, but it got us to a new place. And so in 2003, we created what we call the Texas Success Initiative. It said that assessment was still required, and there were multiple instruments that institutions could use. But it also said institutions could develop their own plan for addressing the developmental needs of students. So that meant that for those students who were on the edge, who were just a few points away from the pass rate on whatever test they chose to use, that there were other options for the institutions that they could use other than putting them in a 3-semester DevEd sequence. That there were other things that you could do. And so the focus was reducing the barriers for students and reducing the number of students in DevEd. Now, we couldn't reduce the number of students because at the same time we were saying we needed more students in higher ed. And when you open the doors, you're going to bring in more students who need DevEd. And so we really couldn't do that, but we really did try to we tried to reduce the number of students in DevEd. And we had mixed results. So here's what happened. DevEd was not a uniform priority across our institutions. When we did the assessment, we found when that compliance culture went away, the focus on DevEd went away. And so we had a lot of institutions not really thinking about DevEd. They were doing it, but it wasn't integrated into a real universal and comprehensive conversation at the campus about how we were going to achieve student success. Second thing is the changes that actually happened on campuses were really minor. You know, when I talked about that culture of compliance, the people who were recommending policy changes were the people who had grown up in that compliance culture. And so none of them felt like they had permission to really change things up. And I can't begin to say how critical those 10 years were in ruining what could have been a really good thing. Because what happened is, with this compliance culture, it took a lot to overcome that. And there was no formal permission giving, and so the people making decisions didn't really make good decisions. And so any changes that actually did happen were adopted very slowly. Even though people were doing good assessment of their students, no one was using the data. We didn't know what any of it meant. It was going in a file drawer, or there was where my IR people. There might be an IR person who was looking at it, but no one else was. And there was absolutely very, very little innovation. So even though we tried, after a few years, none of that worked. And so something new had to happen. We had to find a way to innovate. The age of initiatives is what I like to call this. The decade from 03 to 13. Can you find yourself on the bus? I know there are a few of you who were there. I know Larry is here. If you can find him, I'll give you $1. So what happened is, during that time, I think a lot of states were going through the same kind of thing that Texas went through. It was happening in New Jersey, it was happening in Texas, it was happening in Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, California, take your pick. We were all frustrated with what we were doing. And so we looked at philanthropy, and we looked at other ways to explore innovation. And so this was the birth of the Achieving the Dream initiative. This was the birth of CESI, the Community College Survey of Student Engagement. Right after the first couple of years of Achieving the Dream came the Gates-funded Developmental Education Initiative, and after that, Completion by Design. The American Association of Community Colleges launched the 21st Century Initiative in the latter part of that decade of work, and then Complete College America grew up. And I'm going to spend some time talking about that last one as well as some of these others. So let's talk about what happened with Achieving the Dream. There were 5 states in the first round of Achieving the Dream. And so how many of you are in ATD schools now? Christine, how many of the 19? This is a quiz. 5 of the 19. So 5 of the 19, and when Achieving the Dream started in Texas, it was 7 of the 50. Now it's 27 of the 50 are in Achieving the Dream. But in that first round, it was just 7, and Texas was one of the first 5 states in that group. And Achieving the Dream did a few things. One, and I think probably the most important thing it did, was to move to this culture of evidence. Any of you who have been to the ATD Institutes, or any of you who have read any of the information from Achieving the Dream, the focus is on making evidence-based decisions. And this is critical to really improving student outcomes. If you don't know how well your students are doing, if you don't disaggregate that data to see how different student populations are doing, if you don't use that data to make decisions not just at the department level, but at the college level, at the board level, you're really not making data-driven decisions. And I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from the first few years of Achieving the Dream, was most of the colleges did adopt that culture of evidence. They all also had very strong leaders, which is another key characteristic of Achieving the Dream, that strong leaders up and down the institution. It wasn't just the president. It was strong IR, it was strong campus leadership, it was strong division leadership, it was strong faculty involvement. All of those, the most successful ATD schools had those characteristics. The least successful had a strong leader but no faculty involvement, or they had faculty involvement but an indifferent leader, and every permutation of that in between. The biggest problem I thought with Achieving the Dream was that it was a whole lot of small-scale strategies. This was the age of boutique innovation. We'll do a pilot program on that. We'll try this innovation for 2 sections, and it'll be great. And if you read the early stuff about innovation in developmental ed from the early part of this century, that's a weird phrase to use, they'll talk about how successful this thing was that they were doing. But when you dug into it, it was successful for the 45 students of the 10,000 students on that campus who were in that boutique program. None of this innovation was happening at scale, which was the other part of, Achieving the Dream was about changing the institution. But they weren't changing the institution. They were looking at little tiny bites, and they weren't engaging everybody that they needed to engage in that process. And so you had these pockets of success, but it wasn't available to most of the students. It was only available to a small number of people. And so as a result of that, if you looked at the actual success data for those institutions in that first cohort of ATD schools, their success metrics did not change a bit. But if you had read any of the magazines, the AACC stuff or ATD data, you'd hear about all this great stuff happening at ATD schools, but it really wasn't that great because it wasn't affecting the majority of students who needed to be involved. So kind of at the end of this initial, really kind of by round 3 of ATD, AACC launched what they call the 21st Century Initiative. And I really do want to compliment AACC. Because if you've, have any of you read the 21st Century Commission report on the future of the community college? If you haven't, I recommend it to you. It's on the AACC website. It's remarkable in that it is the only time I have seen an organization be so self-reflective and self-critical, because they actually looked in the mirror and they said, what are we doing wrong? And what they said is, we are failing the American middle class. That if, as institutions, we fail to be successful for our students and help our students be successful, we are going to lose the battle, and the middle class in this country will disappear. And those are powerful statements, and they talked about 3 key areas. They needed to remake and reform and reinvent the community college. So after this big pronouncement from AACC, and you should read that report, then there was another committee that was put together to actually make recommendations on how to achieve those goals. And so there's something called the Implementation Guide for the 21st Century Commission recommendations. That's also on the AACC website. I co-chaired that committee, and I can tell you we had long meetings. There's a whole lot of work that went into it, and these were the 7 key recommendations that came out of that work. That if we're going to be successful, we have to increase completion rates by 50%. That's big. Dramatically improve college readiness. Readiness means 2 things to me. Readiness means improving our DevEd outcomes for those students who arrive at our institutions not college ready. But readiness also means working in partnership with K-12 to ensure that K-12 understands our expectations for what college ready means. So much of this work, really in the first 20 years of student success work, has been overly siloed. And I know we had some of that conversation this morning with the board, and I know Commissioner Hendricks had said it as well, is we don't spend enough time talking to the people we work with. We spend a lot of time looking at each other and blaming each other and saying we're not doing well enough, or patting ourselves on the back saying we're doing a really great job, but we don't talk about what's happening at K-12. We don't engage with them at a meaningful level, and at the same time we also don't engage with four-year institutions at a meaningful level. As we talk more about what I think is ahead for us in improving student success outcomes, that's really the critical piece. And so readiness is both our own work and partnership with K-12. Closing the skills gap, this is another key part of the conversation. There's so many students who don't see themselves as traditional academics, but who would have tremendous opportunity into the workforce. And we don't sell our workforce programs well enough. We don't market them. We don't work with K-12 to help students explore how good some of those careers are. We don't work with parents to help them understand that someone being in a workforce program is a good thing. We over-stigmatize workforce programs. And so, but we don't get the workforce that we need for the future. If you look at what the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce has done, that's another website I would highly recommend to you. Tony Carnevale, who is the head of the Center for Education and Workforce at Georgetown University, has done tremendous work on looking at what kind of workforce America needs moving forward. And 2/3 of the new jobs in this country are going to require an associate's degree or some level of college. And so some college certification. It's not necessarily a baccalaureate. And that's not a story that we tell very well. That's not the story we've communicated with K-12. That's not a story we've communicated with the legislature. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us there. We need to refocus the college mission and refine institutional roles. That's more getting into ourselves. Invest in collaborative support structures. Too often we do dev ed work under academics. We don't invite and involve advising. If you look back, when I talked about the Hardesty Commission, what was one of the key findings is you have to do good advising. Unfortunately, in the budget climate that a lot of our states have had, the first thing that gets cut when you have tough budgets, and I know you've had tough budgets in New Jersey, we had tough budgets in Texas, and when you're looking at those tough budgets, the first thing that gets cut typically are the softer services. The last thing you try to cut is faculty, and so what we've done is we've really marginalized a key part of the student learning experience, which is to help them understand career ideas, to help them understand what their pathway needs to be, to help them understand how much time it's going to take, to help them understand what it's going to cost. All the things that go into good advising are things that are limited. And for those colleges that do have advising, the student to advisor ratios are just insane. And I know it costs money, and I know it's expensive, and maybe there are some technology solutions that we need to look at, but it's certainly something that we have to pay attention to if we're going to be successful. Target public and private investments strategically, it kind of speaks for itself, and implement policies and practice that promote rigor and accountability. I was having a conversation with the commissioner over lunch about this question of accountability. As institutions of higher education, we shouldn't be afraid of it. I think we should own it. I think we need to define what good measures are of accountability, and we need to be honest about what our outcomes are and have a good plan for how we're going to change those outcomes. If we don't do that, if we don't own accountability, someone else will. Because I can tell you, every other organization in the country is talking about accountability. The National Conference of State Legislatures, ALEC, the National Governors Association. Who do you want defining community college accountability? Community colleges or NGA or NCSL or CCA? And so owning it and using something like the Success Center and the Council of Colleges to take hold and to get good accountability information is critical for your future success. And if you own it, then you can come up with good ways to improve your outcomes. The last group I'll talk about in this section is called Complete College America. How many of you know them? A good number of you. I'll be honest, I don't like them. And they don't like me. When Christine said I was warm, you won't get that from any of the CCA people. I think their heart's in the right place. I think they're focused on the important question of how do we get better performance for our students, and how do we improve student outcomes, how do we get where we need to get. My difficulty with them is that theirs is a top-down approach, and theirs is a prescriptive approach. They believe that they have found the magic bullets, and that if you shoot these magic bullets, that all of your problems are going to be solved. If you do their version of co-requisite remediation, if all of your students enrolled full-time for 15 hours, if all of your students were block-scheduled in structured programs, and if they were in their version of guided pathways, then we are in Shangri-La. That's fantasy. You can't implement these things the same way at every institution. And CCA's audience is primarily state legislatures and governor's offices and boards. And these are the people they're talking to, and these are the people who are saying, we're going to dictate how you're going to fix your accountability problem. And so that's why I said, if you don't own your accountability issues, someone else is going to own them for you, and there are people actively out there wanting to own them. And there are people actively out there who say, we know the answers. Now, I think there are some good answers. Some of these things are good answers for some students, but these aren't good answers for every student in every institution. And not every state can do these the same way. When they talk about structured schedules, their model is Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech doesn't charge tuition. Every student is a full-time student. Every student has full ride scholarships for their non-tuition stuff. And so they can go full-time, none of them work, and they've got great student outcomes. Are you surprised? I'm not either. And if I could give every community college student a full ride to pay for books, tuition, living expenses, and everything else, and if they could go to school full-time, and if they had the small student-to-teacher instruction ratios that they have at Tennessee Tech, which is a very specialized tech institution, not to be confused with a community college in Tennessee, it's different, and I'd have the same outcome. But when they come to legislatures, and they came to the Texas legislature and said, you need structured schedules. Well, it puts us in kind of a funny place, is to say, yeah, structured schedules would be great, but are you going to give us all of the other parts of what makes structured schedules work for Tennessee Tech? No. And so we couldn't get that. So it's just some of what my difficulty is with their work. And again, I personally like some of the people there, and I think their heart's in the right place, but I just think that their approach is not the right approach. And so, what is? So let's have a revolution, right? Let's figure out what's going to work for us. Let's figure out how we're going to make good decisions about how we're going to fix at least one part of the readiness problem. The part that we own is how do we improve DevEd outcomes? So try to find my revolution picture. In hindsight, I should have put up a picture of something more colonial given the state I'm in, but I've been doing a lot of ancestry stuff, and so I was finding all the French relatives, and so I was feeling French. So let's look at some of our options. For English and reading and writing, the Accelerated Learning Program, referred to commonly as ALP, not to be confused with ALF, for the 3 people who watched that show. It's developed at the Community College of Baltimore County. It's a co-requisite program for students whose placement scores put them in Dev Ed writing. Students simultaneously enroll in their introductory writing class, their gateway writing class, which is for them English 101, and their Dev Ed writing class is English 052. And so you have a mixed class of 101, and then for those students who test into 052, they have a subsequent class period, and so they enroll for 6 hours. And so they do their 101, and then in 052, they focus on the things that are challenging to them. And so say you have your 101 classes, 25 students, 10 of those are going to be 052 classes, and those 10 students go into 052, and it's 10 students. which is an issue when you're looking at cost models. They go into 052, work on their DevEd, or work on their writing skills in order to be able to be successful. And so when we talk about data-driven, what does the data tell us? Well, they've done it for a while, and for those students who were in, and so the first set of numbers are students who were not in ALP, and the second set of numbers is for students who were. And so for non-ALP students, they passed the DevEd writing class at 59%. If you were in the ALP program, you passed at 77%. So I would say that's a pretty good result. And they've got results for, I think, 8 years, and they're seeing pretty consistent results on this. And so I think that's pretty reliable data. The passage rates on 101, I think, are probably the most remarkable. And so those students in 101 who did not go through ALP, but went through the regular sequence, only passed the gateway course at 27%. That's not good. And for those students who did go through ALP, they passed at 66%. That's, I think, a pretty good ratio. And the other thing, and I didn't put this on the chart, for students who didn't need any DevEd, their passage rates in 101 are in the 67, 68 range. And so they're seeing similar results for DevEd students as non-DevEd students, which is good. And that's where you get to the last one, which is what happens in the next course, 102. And so the non-ALP students slightly outperform the ALP students. So their conclusion, and what Peter, who's really kind of the father of the ALP program, says, is we're not making great writers in the ALP program, but we're making people who can write at a level that makes them competent enough to succeed. So they're passing the course at a similar rate, granted not as high as any of us would like to see, but they're seeing a pretty good success rate here. And so I think the data there is very good. They've got a very good website. You can just Google ALP, and they've got lots of curricular materials, lots of stuff to look at, lots of stuff that you can dig into. You know, I've just kind of tried to pick out a few nuggets to sort of elicit some of the conversation that you're going to have in a few minutes. California Acceleration Project. The CAP program is really both for math and for reading and writing, and so I'm going to focus just on the reading and writing piece. Their approach is integrated reading and writing. And so they combine those into a single class with a single faculty member. And they also have an acceleration component to it, which means they compress their two-sequence course into one course, or two-semester course into one semester, and into an accelerated course. And their results, and I don't know if have any of you heard Katie Hearn speak from Chabot College, who really does a lot of the work on their integrated reading and writing. For anyone who's a college football fan, she nicknamed herself the Honey Badger. And for those of you non-college football people, the Honey Badger was a defensive player for LSU who was just a beast on the field. And so Katie views herself as a beast on integrated reading and writing, and she's a really passionate advocate for this, and the data prove her out. The results that they're seeing on their integrated reading and writing are astonishing. For non-CAP students, they're passing 101 at 35%. For CAP students, they're passing at 67%. So they're doubling, nearly doubling and other math people here checking me, nearly doubling the success rates for their students. Again, they're extremely generous on their website. There's lots of data there. And there's a recent study that's been done on the CAP program. And what we're seeing there is the same kind of thing that we see really in implementation of any innovation. And that is the fidelity to implementation is really key to the success of the program. There were a number of colleges that said they were doing it, but they did it really badly, or they did it half-heartedly. And I call this group of colleges the collectors. And by that I mean, you've got people who say, we're doing this, we're doing that, we've got 27 different initiatives, we're doing all of this great stuff in community college success, but they're not doing any of it very well. And so it's not just it's one thing to say we're doing it, it's another thing to say we're actually doing it with fidelity. It's another thing to say we're doing it with a true commitment at the institutional level, that we're doing it at scale, that we're not doing it for just 2 sections of students, but that we're doing it for all students. So if you look at the outcomes of those institutions that did it poorly, they didn't see very good results. So when you look at the CAP student data, you're going to see outcomes, and the evaluator, and they had an external evaluator look at it. It's not just them tooting their own horn. The evaluator saw this, and so actually created different categories of institutions. They called them low acceleration campuses, which means they weren't moving very fast at implementing the program. And those results aren't very good. And so how well you do something really matters as to whether you're going to get the kind of outcome that you really need if that's going to work for you. Mathematics pathways. So now we'll move into math. I think Uri Treisman has spoken here in the past. Uri is a professor of mathematics at the University of Texas at Austin, and has been very passionate about, and actually is a community college graduate, and a MacArthur Fellow. So he's a pretty smart guy. He worked with Carnegie in developing Statway, and now has his own project called Mathematics Pathways. It was called the New Mathways Project. It was called the NMP, and he did that in partnership with me when I was in my former role at the Texas Association of Community Colleges to really develop the program at scale for Texas colleges. But whether it's Mathways or Statway, it's the same principle, and Mathways really moves around 4 key principles, and those are the ones that are up there. Multiple math pathways with relevant and challenging content for specific fields of study. And so you've got 3 pathways for students. You've got quantitative reasoning, statistics, and a STEM path with calculus-based algebra. Acceleration that allows the student to complete the college-level math course more quickly than in a regular sequence. And so, again, it's acceleration, similar to what the California people do with their math, only this is done in the context of the pathways model. Intentional use of strategies to help students develop skills as learners. This, I think, is kind of the unsung hero of Mathways. For those students who can't do the co-requisite work, there's actually an accelerated DevEd math sequence, but it's paired with a student success course. And that student success course has a lot of learning skills attached to it that aren't just math, but learning skills that apply across the institution. And so I know Christine has done a lot of work on student success courses. If you look at the course that they've developed and the curricular material that they have, I think you'll find that that's a key piece of making that work. And curricular design based on proven practice. It's kind of the 4 key components of Mathways. The other key component that's not up here is there's a belief that you can do Mathways your way. Like New Jersey, Texas community colleges are fiercely independent. There's a belief that we know what we're doing at our college. We know our students better than you know them. And so what the Mathways model does is it says, here are the guiding principles, here are examples of curriculum, adapt them to your students and your needs. As long as you have fidelity to the principles, we don't care whether you use our specific curriculum, but the fidelity level to the principles and within all of these, there's a lot more below them in order to test how close they are in good implementation. Then you can do it yourself. And some of our colleges are doing that. Some of them are saying, we don't have the instructional designers on our campus to do that kind of stuff. You've got it. We'll use your stuff. Other institutions say, we've got great institutional design people. We're going to adapt your materials and use them for our students. So both models are working and both models are producing good results. Now, I don't have numbers up here because the only numbers I have so far are numbers from individual institutions. And I can tell you the anecdotal data is astoundingly good. We're seeing 50 to 80% improvements in student success in developmental math at the institutions who are implementing the Mathways model in Texas. And I don't have those numbers up there because they hired, UT hired an external evaluator. And so there's actually a random assignment study that's going on right now so that we can give you real data on how successful it really is. And that study should be available sometime early next year. I expect, and I think all the people at UT expect, that those numbers are going to be very promising. And I think, and if you look at StatWays, there's the same kind of outcomes where they're seeing good stuff on implementation. This is an approach that a lot of states are starting to take, which kind of leads me to the last piece of this conversation about the innovations, is we can talk about these innovations in isolation, but really there are a couple of key components to them. Is a lot of them focus on integrating the student into the institution, not just whether they succeed at English, reading, writing, and math. There's a connection to what comes next. And that's, I think, part of what makes them more successful. They're not just boutique programs, they're a key part of the DNA at the institution, which is the other takeaway. The last piece of this is kind of the lingering question, is a lot of these models work great for students who just have, who are just slightly in need of support in order to be successful. What about those students who need a lot of help? Do any of these work for those students? And the answer is, I don't know. Nobody knows. I know that's a concern for you. It's a deep concern for me. And as Christine mentioned, I co-chair the Policy Leadership Trust on Student Success, and Scott Rawls is my co-chair from Northern Virginia Community College. We wrote an article that was published in Inside Higher Ed on that very question, is we can't lose sight of those students when we talk about innovation. None of us have the answer yet. There are a lot of people working furiously on that question. And if you guys develop the answer, we want to know what it is because we want to disseminate that information to as many people as possible. But I want to make sure that we don't forget those students, because I think when you look at CCA or some of these other folks who talk about just do these things and you'll solve all your problems. They do work for that band of students who are close to being college ready, but they don't always work for those students who need a lot more help. And so we got to figure that piece out. And it's a concern for me, it's a concern for you, it's a concern for all of us who really have those students' interests at heart, because we know we can't really succeed as institutions until we make all of our students successful. There are other things that we do, and there's a long list of things here. Pre-matriculation programs, summer bridges, course compression. Are any of you doing course compression? I didn't pay a lot of attention to this until recently. There's one college in Texas that's actually not up here. It's Odessa College. They've done all of their courses in 8 weeks. Their retention rates have gone through the roof. It's astounding, and so I want to see more data on what they're doing, but at least the preliminary results have been pretty amazing. And so every semester, students sign up for, let's say, 12 hours, but they will take 6 courses in 8 weeks, and then, or 6 hours in 8 weeks, and the next 6 hours the next 8 weeks, which is how they do the complicator is how you package Pell and all the other stuff that have traditional semesters in their models. But the data's been pretty good so far. Student support services, learning communities, just across the river at City University of New York, their ASAP program is getting a lot of attention. If you haven't looked at that, I recommend it. Ohio is actually implementing ASAP at a number of their colleges. Student success courses, you've got a resident expert on that. And the other population, which will be the last part here, ABE students. I think Texas has the distinction of being the absolute worst ABE state in the country. The budget for ABE in Texas is smaller than the budget for ABE in San Diego County, California. Just to give you a sense of scale, we have 3 million eligible adult learners. We serve about 120,000. So we suck. But if you look at state goals for college attainment, there is not a state in the union that can achieve their attainment goals without engaging adult learners. And until we crack that nut, that's a whole other one, we're not going to get where we need to be. So now the happy part. How do we get where we need to go? We call this and I borrowed this from Uri Treisman, who I talked about it at UT. He's kind of a contradiction because when you ask him, Uri, are you concerned about something? He said, my mother always taught me one thing, you can never worry enough. But he also is a hopeful man, and so he talks about a joyful conspiracy. How do we make all of these challenges become opportunities for our faculty, for our leadership at our institutions, and for our students? And so I've never seen them do this. I've never seen a happy nun. But I didn't want to be sent to hell just for always criticizing them. So there they are. And these, when I have guiding principles, these are just my ideas, is social equity and the economic future of our states and countries depend on our success. Solutions need to serve the needs of all students. Solutions need to be at scale. Solutions should be data informed and reformed. Is you can't just adopt something and just keep doing it. You've got to constantly pay attention to what you're doing and have a feedback loop for how you improve and adjust what's happening. Your solutions need to be integrated and not piecemeal. You can't become a collector. You can't just say we're doing all of these things and not have an overarching goal. And I think the most promising thing that I've seen come along is the conversation about guided pathways. If you haven't read the book by Tom Bailey and co-authors, I again highly recommend reading the book, Redesigning America's Community Colleges. It's a quick read, and it'll challenge some of your thoughts. And you know, I'm not 100% in agreement with everything in there, but I think they have created a framework for having a healthy conversation about what we need to be doing as institutions to create highly structured pathways. Are you having trouble reading some? The author, Thomas Bailey, Davis Jenkins, and Shanna Jaggers. Yeah, and they're at the Community College Research Center at Teachers College, Columbia. So, and actually Tom is on the board for the Success Center. So
Biden is going to be speaking at Columbia next Thursday night at 7 o'clock.
I wish I could go. I'll be in San Antonio with Uri Treisman. There are 6 states implementing math pathways, and so we're working with those 6 states next week. So guided pathways, I think, is a promising conversation. And so instead of a generation of failure, I think we need to work towards a generation of success. And so there are happy students and happy faculty and happy administrators. And I'll say thank you. And
What's the difference between the guided pathways that's on the slide right here and the one that you didn't like on Community College America?
there's some subtle differences, and it's really about implementation. And I think guided pathways needs to be an organic development at the institutional level in partnership with your institutions. I don't think you can do guided pathways top down at the state level. And the CCA approach tends to be more top down. I think the most successful innovations have been top down and bottom up, where they meet somewhere in the middle. And I think a true implementation of guided pathways has to definitely be that mix of both bottom up and top down. Okay, well, thank you all.
Thank you again, Ray, for that excellent presentation. Thank you, thank you. So we are actually going to shift gears. I am just going to, hang on one second. Yes. We will be taking a break in just a minute, just so you know. I haven't forgotten about a break. There it goes. Okay, so what we want to do with the next half of the afternoon is to really focus on the New Jersey story and give you a chance to talk with your colleagues, network with colleagues, and really kind of move forward this initiative. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is in your packet, you should have a piece of paper that's double-sided that says the New Jersey story. You're going to pull it out, but don't fill it out this second. I'm going to bring your attention back to that in just a moment. I am going to ask you to fill that out today to the best of your ability. If you feel like you're not sure, just make a note on it or something that I'm not really the best person. If you're worth the other people from your institution, we only need 1 per institution, so you could work collaboratively. It should only take a minute or so. We designed it so it would be very quick. Let me explain to you why we have this documentation here. I've been getting asked a lot of questions as I'm circulating around about how do I know where my college is and compared to the other, where are we at in New Jersey with this issue of reforming developmental ed? And the truth of the matter is I've been hearing lots of great stories, but I don't have the New Jersey story. You know, I can tell about this college's story and that college's story, but we don't have the full picture. And what I'd like to do in the center is gather data like this and then distribute it back to you. We'll summarize it, compile it, and then disseminate it to you. So we're going to ask for your help because I can't create this information. Hopefully this will be something that you will all find valuable. I know it will help guide the center's work as identifying, let's be able to track our success and identify areas for further improvement. So just tuck that away for a moment. What we're going to do now in the next part of the afternoon is called the Jigsaw Classroom exercise. How many of you are familiar with the Jigsaw Classroom? Have you participated or done it before? Oh, a lot of you are going to be walking away with a new little tool in your toolbox. All right, great. So the Jigsaw Classroom is a way to do class group work that is very productive. So we're going to model that. It's an activity I use in my classes all the time, and I think it works really well with professional audience as well. So I'm going to briefly explain to you how it's going to work. I'm going to set the backstage for it. I'm going to get you set up in your home base group. After I'm set you up in your home base group, I'm going to ask you to fill out the form real quick, take a 5-minute break, and as you take a break, we're going to set the tables up and we'll be ready for the next part. So if you need to go use the bathroom or whatever, that'll be the time to do it. So here's how Jigsaw Classroom works. So you're all going to be put in a home-based group in a moment, which means you're going to have to be sitting at a table with 6 people. So don't move yet, but we'll move you in a moment. Then what's going to happen is you will all decide at that table which topic you are most interested in talking about. And then that you will all then will pick up and move. And when you come back from your 5-minute break, you're going to see tabletops on the tables. You go to the table that has your expert topic on it. You'll actually be in that group for about a half an hour, approximately. We'll be monitoring. And Ray and Amy and I are going to be monitoring and walking around, listening and supporting you as you're working with your expert groups. And then at the end, you're going to go back to your home base group. And here's the tricky part. You will have 2 minutes to bring back a key concept or idea, one, so you have to kind of zoom it down to kind of the key takeaway from your conversation. And we also want you to bring back a question that your group could bring back to your campus and have the conversation continue. So the product of that 30-minute conversation, you need to deliver to your home base group. So that's kind of how the process works. So I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So here are the 6 expert topics. You actually have a handout in your packet also that has all 6 on it because that'll be your note-taking form for the end. And this is where you'll decide which topic you want to be, an expert in. So we'll come back to that in a moment because I want to address a couple of these topics that we may not have. I want to make sure we all have this at least a baseline of foundational knowledge on. Success strategies, I think we kind of get. Self-efficacy, I want to spend a minute on. So self-efficacy is not just, do I feel good about who I am? It's not self-esteem. It is specifically a belief in whether or not you can be successful at the task at hand. So you might have high self-efficacy in math. You might have low self-efficacy in reading. You might have high self-efficacy in your athletic skills. You might have low self-efficacy in your social skills. You can have different levels of self-efficacy for different tasks. So self-efficacy is all about the belief. So this one is really a mindset one. And there's a lot of literature that speaks to folks who have high self-efficacy have more of a growth mindset. So I'm going to give you just a quick little refresher on that if you're not familiar with that concept. You are also more likely to set higher, more ambitious goals, put forth more effort, and have higher levels of persistence. So even when you hit a roadblock, you're going to keep on going. So that's why self-efficacy is so important and is one of our topics. So I just want to share with you briefly this famous study that's been done by Mueller and Dweck. I know a lot of you are familiar with Dweck's work on growth mindset, but in case someone is not, I want to make sure we all have this basic foundational knowledge. Mueller and Dweck did this fascinating study. It was done with elementary school students, and here's what they did. They had all of their students complete a puzzle, and the puzzle was of moderate difficulty, so it was really designed to be a successful experience, and they all were successful. And then it was an experimental study, so students were assigned to receive one of 3 different types of feedback. Either you were told, wow, you did really well, you must be really smart. Or you were told, wow, you did really well, you must have worked really hard. Or you were told, wow, you did really well, period. You have to figure it out yourself over here. That's our control group. You always need that in psychology. And so they were given feedback after that first puzzle. And what happened was they then had a difficult puzzle. So it was designed to set up a failure experience for all the students. So all of the students struggled on that difficult puzzle. What Mueller and Dweck were interested in comparing was the first moderate puzzle performance to the last moderate puzzle performance. So at the end of the experiment, they also did another puzzle, similar difficulty level to the first puzzle. And they wanted to see how did those different groups perform. And you can see here by this chart that there was a significant difference between how groups performed. So let's start with the green bar in the middle. The green was the control group. So these are my folks over here. You did really well, period. I call this not refrigerator worthy. You know, it went up a little bit, but they just got used to doing puzzles. This was not a significant, improvement really. So you folks kind of stayed the same. Let's take a look at the red bar. The red bar was my effort group. So these are the folks who I told you must have really done well because you worked hard. Well, after your failure experience, what do you think you said to yourself? I guess I didn't work hard enough. So you rolled up your sleeves and you got busy, man. Look at you. You knocked it out of the park. Way to go, right? Now over here, I don't know what happened. My smart group got not so smart at the end, right? So what happened is you probably said to yourself after your failure experience, I guess I'm not that smart. And most folks think that smartness is a fixed entity, right? So if you think it's fixed and you have that fixed mindset, you're going to give up. And so not only did you not do as well as my effort group, you did worse. So I just want to make sure you have that background in case you're in the self-efficacy group, okay? Now, the other group that I think you need to have a little background on is one of the questions relates to stereotype threat. So Amy and I were talking as we were prepping for today, and we talked about the importance of talking about diversity. And as we talked about it more and more, we came to the conclusion that what we need to talk about is the concept of stereotype threat, because that is a powerful concept here. So for those of you who are not familiar with what stereotype threat is, it's about because we all belong to different groups. So I'm going to use the example of women versus men. So women, often there's a stereotype that they are not as good at math as men. So if you belong to that group, you then have this extra undue pressure on yourself to combat and disprove that stereotype. And that extra pressure actually ends up helping you confirm the stereotype, and it ends up backfiring on you. So there's some studies out there, and this is one particular one that was done with a Gateway math course. And you can see here what these researchers did was that they told both men and women that you were taking a test that's aimed at measuring mathematical abilities. Well, if we go with that gender stereotype for a moment, women are going to think, oh no, like this isn't good. Well, what they did was they added an extra layer. So half of the group only got this, so this is the stereotype threat condition. But the other group was told that, but then was also told this mathematics test has not shown any gender differences. So it was kind of defying the stereotype for them. And what they discovered at the end of the day is obviously women in this group outperformed women in that group, even though the test was the same level of difficulty. So I wanted you to have a little bit of background on stereotype threat, so in case you're in that group, you have some background information on that. So I'm going to go back again here for a moment to the, oops, here we go, keep going. Ooh, one more. Okay, so we have these 6 different groups. So here's what I need to have happen now. I need to have you all in groups of 6. Less than 6 at a table is not going to work. If we have 7, I can live with it as long as everybody's got 6. So if you're not at a table with 6 people, can you go make some new friends? And that's all. You're going to be there only for about 2 minutes, and then you all have to decide which topic. So Amy and I are going to walk around and make sure you're all in groups of 6, and then you folks start deciding which topic do you want to be in. Okay, folks, I am going to ask you to stop the conversations and bring your attention back to the front of the room again if you can. This is always the hardest part, is stopping good conversations. We want to keep the conversations going, but today we do have to wrap things up, so if you can bring your attention back. So you folks were doing a phenomenal job. Amy and Ray and I were walking around listening in awe of all the wonderful ideas and strategies we heard you sharing. Just as a friendly reminder, we are asking every table, you should have had a note taker to give to Donna or just put on the table over there on their way out. Please leave that with us so that we can also compile all those great ideas. So since many of you indicated you weren't familiar with the Jigsaw Classroom, hopefully you found the activity itself to be helpful and the content. I hope you can bring that back into your classrooms and meetings. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to make a couple of quick announcements, and then I want to give the mic back over to Ray to help us kind of inspire us and wrap things up as we move forward. But a couple of quick announcements. Again, we need to have those summary sheets to Donna at the end. You also have in your folders, there's a CEU credit paper. We are very appreciative of Middlesex County College for allowing us to be a provider for them. So if you would like CEU credits for today, you would fill that out, but you have to hand it in today to Donna. So you have one of those. If you want CEU credits, you have to hand that in today. And we also are recycling name badges. So on the way out, please recycle your name badge. And if you didn't sign the attendance sheet when you walked in and you only grabbed your name badge, please sign the attendance sheet as well. So at this point, I'm going to bring back Dr. Garcia. If you can come back and give us your last words of wisdom as we shift to our revolution and move New Jersey forward with developmental education.
Thank you. Last month was the 16 de septiembre, which is the Mexican Revolution. And it's celebrated with a scream. It's called the grito. And the grito is to say viva. And so for all of the work that you've done today, viva. Viva. For taking this back to your campuses and inspiring your colleagues. Viva. Oh, you guys are horrible. Viva! For making this a top priority for yourselves and for the future of New Jersey. Viva! What makes me joyful, what makes me see jumping nuns, is the people in community colleges. Just walking around the room, seeing the energy, seeing the commitment to the students, seeing the real concern is really what keeps me involved. I stepped down from my real job, and I stay involved not because of Schadenfreude. I don't want to share your pain, but because I care about these issues and because I like being around other people who care. And that's what I saw in this room. And so thank all of you for what you do and for what you will keep doing. So with that, one last time,
Thank you, Ray. Can we all please give him just a round of applause for a phenomenal afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. We are grateful for you taking time out to come to visit us in New Jersey. And thank you all for the work that you do. In case you don't know, next Friday we have another event on Guided Pathways, Jobs for the Future. Chris Baldwin and Andrea Junko will be here. So if you have not yet registered, I think Donna wants you to actually register outside. So she's got a computer set up and all. So you can go ahead and get registered for next week. And if not, then we will have some other events. I do want you to mark your calendars for December 9th. We're going to have a teaching and learning conference with Pete Watkins. Phenomenal stuff coming your way. So thank you so much for today. Thank you.